On April 1938, an unknown comic book hit the shelves, one that would go on to introduce the world to Superman, the most famous superhero of all time. Since then, Superman has starred in over 10,000 comic book issues, had multiple TV series and films based on him, including some of the highest-grossing movies ever made. In addition, there are a plethora of video games and merchandise inspired by this character. But how did this Kryptonian alien become such a cultural phenomenon? Let's find out! Jerry Siegel, a comic writer, created Superman with Joe Shuster, an illustrator. The two had met while attending Glenville High School, and their friendship led them to make comic books together. Their first attempt at creating a superhero was rejected by Detective Comics. This would be the first of many times they tried to sell Superman to publishers before it eventually happened. Siegel and Shuster continued to improve their craft and honed in on the idea of Superman, which they felt would make a good fit for the publisher. They were correct, as Action Comics, now known simply as DC Comics, became one of the largest comic book publishers of all time, thanks in part to this superhero. When Siegel and Shuster pitched Superman to DC Comics, it was initially received with mixed reviews. The executives did not like the idea of a superhero who could fly, feeling that it was too similar to other characters already on the market. However, after the dynamic duo added a strong female character to the mix, the executives approved the creation of the character. And so, Superman debuted in Action Comics. One in April of 1938. It wasn't just any cover, though, but rather one of the most iconic covers in comic book history. To this day, people recognize the image of Superman holding a car over a building as he flies away with Lois Lane in his arms. At the time, Superman was not the hero we know today. He was much different. Superman wore a pair of long underwear on top of his suit along with a cape. His suit itself was also very different from what we are used to seeing. Instead of being blue and red, Superman sported a black suit with a large yellow S on his chest. There was also no such thing as kryptonite, and Superman's powers seemed to be endless. In the first story, he was even able to save a diamond from being destroyed by a bomb, something that would later become one of Superman's notable weaknesses. Despite these differences, readers immediately took to Superman, and by the end of the year, Action Comics was selling over 1 million copies per issue. The success of the character was due to several factors. Superman offered readers hope during a time when the Great Depression was still affecting the country. Superman gave people an escape from reality and allowed them to dream about a world where there was a superhero who could help those in need. Additionally, Superman was one of the first superheroes to appear in comics. While there were other heroes in comic books before him, such as the sensational Superman was more relatable and human-like, making him more appealing to readers. Lastly, the artwork of Joe Shuster played a big role in the appeal of Superman. Shuster's art was dynamic and exciting, which helped to bring the character to life. As Superman grew in popularity, new stories and adventures were created, but the character himself remained pretty much the same until the late 1940s. During World War II, Superman became a symbol of hope and freedom, battling villains that represented the enemies of the United States. After the war ended, however, Superman's popularity waned somewhat. This was likely due to the fact that people no longer needed an escape from reality, as they had during the difficult times of the Great Depression and World War II. Nevertheless, Superman continued to appear in comic books and other media throughout the years. It wasn't until the 1960s that Superman experienced a resurgence in popularity. This can be attributed to several factors. First of all, the 1960s was a time of great social change, and people were looking for a hero who embodied the ideals of justice and equality. Superman fit this role perfectly. Additionally, the introduction of new characters such as Batman and Wonder Woman gave Superman a new lease on life. These characters provided a different type of heroism than Superman, which made him stand out even more. Lastly, the artwork of the time began to emphasize Superman's physical prowess, which made him more appealing to young readers. In the late 1960s, Superman made his way to the small screen. The show aired from 1966 to 1970 and was a massive hit. It is widely credited with helping to revive interest in the campy tone of the series, as well as the performances of the cast, especially Christopher Reeve as Superman, made the show enjoyable for both children and adults. In 1978, Superman made the jump from television to the big screen. The film was a critical and commercial success, grossing over $200 million worldwide. It was the first superhero movie to be produced on a large scale and set the standard for all future adaptations. Christopher Reeve reprised his role as Superman and was joined by an all-star cast, including Marlon Brando as Jor-El, Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, and Margot Kidder as Lois Lane. The film was praised for its special effects, action sequences, and story. It was also a cultural phenomenon, capturing the public's imagination and making Superman a household name once again. The success of the original Superman film led to 3 sequels, all of which were released within 10 years. Superman 2 was released in 1980 and featured Gene Hackman returning as Lex Luthor. The film also introduced the character of Ursa, played by Faye Dunaway. Superman 3 was released in 1983 and marked a departure from the previous films as it featured a more serious tone. Richard Pryor co-starred as a computer hacker who becomes a villain. Superman 4. The Quest for Peace was released in 1987 and dealt with the subject matter of nuclear war. Despite its seriousness, the film was a box office disappointment. The reason for this was mainly due to the fact that the general consensus of critics was that the film was not as good as the previous 3. After Superman 4, it was decided that a break needed to be taken from the character. This proved to be a good decision, because it gave audiences time to miss the character and made them more receptive to another Superman film. At the same time, it allowed the filmmakers to come up with a new and improved version of Superman. In 1996, Superman returned to the big screen in the form of Superman. The movie? This film was a huge success, grossing over $390 million worldwide. It was also critically acclaimed, with many praising the performances of Christopher Reeve and Gene Hackman. Brendan Ruth was seen as a breath of fresh air after the campy portrayal of the character in the previous films. In 2006, a new series of Superman films began with the release of Superman Returns. This film was meant to be a sequel to the original Superman film and featured Brandon Ruth in the lead role. Despite having big shoes to fill, Roth did a great job in the role and was well received by audiences. Unfortunately, the film was a box office disappointment, only grossing $394 million worldwide against a budget of $275 million. Despite this, the film was still enjoyable and is considered by many to be better than the previous 2 Superman films. In 2013, Henry Cavill was cast as Superman for the film Man of Steel. The film was directed by Zack Snyder and also starred Amy Adams, Michael Shannon, and Russell Crowe. Man of Steel was a massive success, grossing over $660 million worldwide. It was also well received by critics who praised its action sequences, visual effects, and performances. Henry Cavill's portrayal of Superman was a bit darker and more brooding than previous versions, but he still managed to capture the essence of the character. Unfortunately, it seems that Warner Brothers wanted to make Superman more like Batman and less like Superman. This was evident in the studio's next release, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. This film was a critical and commercial failure, grossing over $800 million worldwide, but still losing an estimated $70 million on its release. It was poorly received by critics who lambasted the film for its poor writing and direction. Despite the negative reception of Batman v Superman, Henry Cavill was asked to return as Superman for the film Justice League. This film also suffered from poor writing and direction, but it was still a box office success, grossing over $1 billion worldwide. After Justice League, it was announced that Cavill would be reprising his role as Superman for the film Shazam: Fury of the Gods. Sadly, the actor stated that he will no longer be portraying the character. This was disappointing news for fans of the character, as Cavill's portrayal was well liked overall. Regardless, Superman will continue to live on in other forms of media. Tyler Hoechlin is currently playing Superman on the CW network and has been well received by fans. Additionally, there are rumors that a new Superman film is in the works with a younger actor in mind for the role. Regardless of who plays the character next, it is clear that Superman will continue to be a cultural icon for years to come. Thank you for watching.